What do I do? If death is all there is, I know this guy gets away with it. Unless there's an afterlife. And that's what Kant, by the way, that's why he could not ground ethics just in pure human reason. He must have gone beyond this and said, if there's got to be society and civilization, there must be ultimate justice. And there must be a perfect, omnipotent, omniscient, ultimate judge. And his moral argument in this book, The Groundwork for Ethics, and you seem very well read, TJ.
Thank you.
And it goes right back to that issue. And on the one hand, we have the mystery. Sometimes it bugs me. I remember the first time reading Joshua and I almost cried. I mean, it's superficially troubling, but I don't know what the Canaanites were like. And from what I've read in some historical background, they weren't the nicest of people either.
Oh no, that's a problem. And
right.
So you say, oh, they probably were, angry or like bad. So God was angry, so they slew them.
And like I said, and when I come to that, there are certain aspects of historical agnosticism.
Oh yeah, and like when it comes to history, is history, and like anybody could say, I could say, oh, what about this group of Christians that did this horrible thing, and you could say, oh, they're mistaken or like whatever.
Sure.
I guess the idea that our morality comes from a person that is watching us, controlling us, or like, if you feel that way, I don't, like there's people that just think that he created things, and it's
deists.
up to us to deists to
Yep.
But I don't think you are one of those. No, you don't. No. So like, that is controlling us. That like will punish us for different things that we think, that we do, everything like that. That Father in heaven that won't go away, that big brother that always is watching out after us, is like, and then to say that when a person, like you said, a person that does some horrible thing and it never gets caught in terms of our criminal justice system, you want that person to be punished as much as when I say being like, of course, like, basically what I'm saying is like, in a world, good people will do good things, bad people will do bad things, but if you want like a good person to do a bad thing, you're going to have to require them to think that they're doing it in God's will. Like, for instance, like there's no person in this room who like would have a child holding it in his arms and thinking, oh my God, this kid is so beautiful, like there must be something going on, and then immediately says, but you know what, we need to start hacking at its genitals because that's what God wants us to do. Or nor does any of us have a daughter that, I guess, excuse me when I say, like, who thinks at 6 years old that we got to cut off her clitoris and sew up her thing because that's what God wants us to do.
Let me address that real fast. Yeah, you want
to get short.
Yes. Let me just address that. One of the things in the decade of the 90s was a huge study on evil by philosophers, and Andrew Delbanco was one of them. And he said, pretty much, and then it led to a Times article, actually by Ron Rosenbaum, who said, what goes into the mind of a Susan Smith or a Jeffrey Dahmer, who would literally take her kids and put them in car seats, like you'd said, and then send them to their death. Again, that's why, and I like the topic here, and of course, with the limited time, I did the best I can to state a very brief, summarized case. How do you ground, that's what I'm saying, grounding ethics at that point is an epistemological problem without them being absolute and transcendent, not the byproduct of some natural process, because again, if we're just a part of nature, Hume said it best, how do you get from scientific is to a moral ought? This is not a Christian speaking. Hume was far from it. But he has a legitimate dilemma. And there have been philosophers like John Searle who has tried to answer that question. But the word ought has two different things. Number one, if you want to make your plane, which Dan flies out frequently, you ought to be at the airport at a certain time. But that's not a moral ought because he can by far miss it. If it doesn't. Again, when morality is taken away from a divine command, and there are issues like the Euthyphro argument, which I'm happy to address, and things like that, it becomes a matter of personal preference. Whether we like it or not, there are certain things that we don't like that God said, but just because that does not negate their truth value.
Okay. I actually have a question for Dan.
so patient.
No, one of Mr. Stidd's main points is whose reason, because it's clear that different people have different ideas of morality, which is a valid point. And one of your responses was that there's more than just the divine command and moral relativism. There can be an absolute morality without God, but how do you ground that? Where do you get that? How do you decide what that should be without God? So in other words, forget about moral relativism. How do you do the absolute without God?
And what you're getting at, it's not an easy question. The question is, what goal should our actions seek? In other words, to call something moral, means it's an action that moves us closer towards a particular goal. Now you could call it human flourishing, as Sam Harris does. You could call it happiness, survival. I won't pick any one of those because that is a difficult question, and I think it's something that we need to work towards. But there's certain things we can agree on. Life is better than death. Happiness is better than sadness. And health is better than illness, and so forth. Certain things that we can agree on that are the objective towards what we're moving towards. Now, the other part of your question is, I disagree that there are moral absolutes because it's all based upon the circumstances, but the arbiter of whether the particular action is moving toward the goal, I'll use the term of human flourishing, or not, is a matter of our ability to reason and project the consequences of our actions into the future. And in that case, there isn't European reason versus Asian reason versus African reason. There's just reason. The ability to reason and the rules for logic are universal. So we can use that as the arbiter of what our actions, what consequences our actions will bring. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Can I rebut that, please, and just say a little bit about that? I go just one step further, though. My question then would be, how do you ground logic if it's universal? Because then we have a problem again, that I don't think that whose reason was really answered correctly. It becomes a very ambiguous term. The issue is without revelation, I would say, and of course you're going to disagree with me, but that's fine. What happens is if we don't have an absolute set of standards for all humans at all times, in all circumstances, and of course, like for example, we know I know in Christian theism, for example, we had certain things that were temporary until Christ fulfilled them. But getting to there's what we call the lex aeternitatis, which is the eternal law of God, that those things transcend all time, all people. Now, people may not like them, but at the same time, that does not negate their validity. And I would definitely say, how do you get from reason, from unguided natural processes? I don't see any logical extension. Where do you get the laws of logic except for that we have the Haldane problem? If my atoms are just, if everything is knowledge and logic are just the random assessment or arrangement of the brain, atoms in my brain, why should I trust anything that comes in it? Because that is the problem. We see a random, unguided, and that's why I liked the topic, for example, so I took it, was the source of morality. We have to ground logic, we have to ground reason, and we have to ask what? It can't just be reason just for the sake of reason, because, again, the question becomes whose reason, and I liked your question, by the way. Okay.
Anyone else?
Reason works.
Yes, sir. Your name?
You did mention the divine command,
Yes, sir.
and I presume...
Your name? I'm sorry.
Oshin, sorry.
Oshin? Okay. Yes, sir.
For you, the divine command comes through the Bible.
Yes, sir.
The Bible wasn't actually written by God. A human being wrote it.
Okay, do you want me to, I can address that. That would be fine.
Well,
can I address that first and then?